What it boils down to is that you don't know what you don't know. You have to learn it. And sometimes you can learn it from other people. You can learn from their experience. You can talk to other people who have been through it. But even if they've been through it, say hi to Juju. I talked to multiple other bookstore owners as I was starting out. And they told me, you need to know this, 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 and this. And I would take 2 out of 5 to heart because I didn't understand. The thing about hindsight is that you don't know what you don't know. You don't know what you're missing until you realize, hey, I could have done that better had I known this thing that I've just gone through.
Welcome to the Curious Cat Bookshop Podcast, the podcast of the independent bookstore of Winsted, Connecticut, creating a literary community in Northwest Connecticut, bringing our local authors to the world and the world to our community in Northwest Connecticut.
Are you gonna let me sit down? I know. Well, Tabitha may or may not come back. This is Pie Wacket. And I am Stacy Whitman, and I am the owner of the Curious Cat Bookshop in Winsted, Connecticut. Today, I thought I'd expand upon my video from February about starting a bookstore, what I did to start a bookstore, and the resources that I used. And today, I thought that I would talk a little bit about some of the things that I wish that I had done now that I'm nearly 2 years into it. Well, technically, I'm 3 years into it almost, but I started my business in October of 2022, but I didn't start doing anything with it officially, like having any events or anything like that until February of 23. And that was as a pop-up. And in late September, we'll be celebrating our 2-year anniversary in our brick and mortar space. So as I'm approaching our 2-year anniversary of running as a full brick and mortar bookstore, I thought I'd talk to you about 5 of the things that I think that there's a little kitty fight going on behind me. I just thought I'd talk to you about 5 things that I would have done differently if I could go and do it all over again. Stop hissing at babies. You're fine. Ow! Don't jump me. Ow. You're fine. Yeah, okay. So that's over. Anyway, the first thing that I think that I ought to have done differently was to start my email list a lot sooner, like from day 1 or even day -60. I didn't start my email list until I was pretty much opening the bookstore itself. I didn't even start my email list before we did our Kickstarter campaign. Well, was it a GoFundMe? We ran a crowdfunding campaign the summer of 2023. And just to give you a little bit of context with that, my dad passed in June of 2023. And I had already had the campaign scheduled for the end of 2023. So in June of 23, I drove home to Illinois from Connecticut while our campaign was beginning. And in August of 23, I drove home again for my dad's funeral because we had a whole bunch of extended family that was coming into town anyway in August. And so they decided to schedule his celebration of life in August. And there is so little that you can plan for when a family member passes. And I was under the gun for some timing because I had received a grant to open on Main Street. And one big thing that I would have done differently was to pause and let me have more time, because even though the circumstances were such that I really honestly couldn't control how things unfolded that summer. The pottery place on Main Street decided to move that summer, and the space and the rent were a perfect size and price for us. And I felt very strongly that I needed to jump on the opportunity. And I don't necessarily regret having done it. But given that all those decisions were made in the midst of some pretty significant grief, it was a rough time. And I wouldn't necessarily, if I had to do it all over again, I might have allowed myself a year to pause. I might have just continued to work on my day job and save up a little bit longer. And that actually gets me to number 2, because I would have gotten out of debt 100%, if possible, before fully starting my bookstore, if I had this all to do over again. Because as I discussed in my video about starting a bookstore, running a bookstore is a very low profit business. I wasn't doing this to make a whole bunch of money. Nobody enters the book business to make a whole bunch of money. If you do happen to make a lot of money, there are authors that make quite a bit of money once they're into their careers or they have a sudden hit. But if you're an editor, if you're a bookstore owner, if you're working in the publishing industry or the book industry in general, none of us go into it expecting to make millions of dollars. If we can make a solid middle-class living, awesome. And you have to understand, I grew up in poverty on a farm. So for me, my idea of a solid middle-class life was being able to afford to go to the dentist on a regular basis, being able to afford to go to the doctor when I needed to, that kind of thing. So like, I already had achieved that in publishing, and I was hoping for that as I start my bookstore. Now, that's a years-long plan. I'm not expecting that even now in year 2, but it's something that I hope that this bookstore will eventually help me to achieve, at least partially. I don't even expect it to make my entire living. So backing up, I would get out of debt completely. I would pay off all my credit cards before I actually started the bookstore if I had this to do all over again, because then you wouldn't have that hanging over you as you're trying to struggle to pay the rent and the payroll and all that stuff out of the bookstore. And I still don't pay myself, mind you. So that's why it's so important that I keep my day job. And related to that, getting out of debt and making sure that I had a solid savings to be able to really boot it off successfully. I have been bootstrapping this from the beginning. Gigi. I've been bootstrapping my bookstore from the beginning because of the circumstances. There was a grant available and it was on a timeline that was faster than I would have preferred, but it was a $10,000 grant for opening up on Main Street. So if I wanted that grant, if I wanted to be able to have that grant help me on Main Street, I needed to be able to make my business work on that timeline. The thing that I'm learning this year, because there was another grant opportunity for me to apply for with the WBDC, the Women's Business Development Council, earlier this year, is that more grants will come along. I really, really tried to hit I believe it was April deadline for the Ignite grant for the WBDC, and I just couldn't do it this year. I couldn't do it. And then I got to talking to my advisors at the WBDC and they said, oh, another one opens in August. You should apply for that one instead and then take your time to figure out what you'll apply for this grant. So that's what I'm in the process of doing now. And it really helped me to take that stress level down just a little bit, to understand that I didn't have to do everything all at once. I could take my time and really plan, and the next one will come along. And so connected to that, take your time and really plan and save up as much as possible, because it will be more expensive than you think. I'm a single person. I don't have anybody else's income to fall back on. So if I fail at my business, it's all me. I don't have, if I'm not making money in my business, I don't eat. I don't pay the rent if I'm not somehow having an income come in. So it's really important to plan ahead. And I sometimes look back and I know that I got ahead of myself sometimes on finances. I had a nice chunk that I started with and I had that grant. But if I had double that, I feel like in year 2, we would probably be more, well, I don't know, because right now, I feel like looking at our numbers, we are on the way to break even. And that's important in year 2, because most small businesses don't really start making a profit until year 5, or they fail. You know, that's how small businesses work. But I feel like we're on a good path toward profitability. We're just not there yet. And a big part of profitability for a small business owner is being able to pay themselves and having that actual sustainability of a foundation. And so the way that I've been surviving has been having a day job to pay my bills. And then all the money that's in the business keeps getting plowed back into the business. And had I had $50,000 or $100,000 in savings 2 years ago, or had I waited to have that much money in the bank, I would have had a more solid foundation and be able to more deliberately make the kinds of decisions that you have to make as a business owner. I would also have hired differently at the beginning, and I don't mean that I would have hired different people necessarily. I am very happy with the booksellers that we've had. They're very strong in what their skills are, but I might have taken the time to look at what we needed to do and how to accomplish that with various skill sets. And so right now, the hiring that I've recently done in the last month, I've just hired 2 people and I'm working on hiring one more. And I might be hiring a manager in the fall. If you've seen me post the manager position, I've actually pulled that because I need to rethink that a little bit as well. Rather than just a part-time bookseller in the store and then hiring somebody else to do another task on top of it and another, I want all of my employees to be booksellers in the store, at least part-time, so that if they have a specialized skill set like social media or marketing or events planning or stuff like that, that they know our community and they know and buy into our goals as a company and that we are all aiming in the same place. And so it's not on my list. So let's call that 4.5, because all of what I'm talking about is, even though I was deliberate about my planning, I had to bootstrap this. And I wouldn't say I've been cutting corners so much as I've had to deal with a lot of circumstances because of lack of money, that if I had enough in the bank as savings, we could ride out those harder times a little bit more easily. And I wouldn't have had to rely on, for example, loans from our payment processor, which come at a very high rate. I could apply for a small business loan and be approved rather than consistently denied. If I had worked on those things more solidly, and I was working on them very much, I got my credit score up 100 points in the year that I started my bookstore, even while dealing with my dad passing. But had I even given myself 6 months more or a year more to work on it even more, I feel like we would have been in a stronger financial position so that I didn't have to bootstrap so hard and feel like I'm approaching burnout, if that makes sense. And then, so number 5, that was not number 4 or 4.5, that was number 3. So number 4 is I would have taken the time before I fully started to connect even more with local community leaders and members, the Economic Development Committee, the Chamber of Commerce. I did some of that as I was trying to figure out where I would put the store, because I was choosing between Torrington, which is where my house is, or Winsted, because they had the grant program. And I ended up going with Winsted, but I feel like there was more networking that I could have done. I could have joined the Chamber of Commerce a little earlier. It was always questions of price, because the Chamber of Commerce, I think it's like $300 a year. And that's a lot when you're just trying to start a business and you're not really quite sure where the priorities should be. And so let's back up, because when I say that these are things that I would do differently now because I am 2 years in and I have this hindsight to look at, the thing about hindsight is that you don't know what you don't know. You don't know what you're missing until you realize, hey, I could have done that better had I known this thing that I've just gone through to learn. So number 5 is I would have started taking classes from the Women's Business Development Council. It's ctwbdc.org is their website. I would have started taking classes from them sooner and really plotted out a little bit more. I had a mentor through the Small Business SBDC or SBA. I had a counselor who walked me through my business plan early on, that I was meeting with her all throughout 2022, just trying to figure out, how do I do this? How do I do that? How do I plan? And she was a really good mentor. But had I taken those classes from WBDC at the same time, which I didn't discover WBDC until I was well into the process with her, I feel like I could have really supplemented what we were talking about. Now, I'm saying this as somebody who has started a business before, 2 books, which is the imprint of Lee and Low that I currently work for. That is the imprint that I was the publisher of until last October. And we can talk about what it is to be an editor in another video. If you guys are interested, let me know in the comments. But like, I started that as a small business as well, with the SBA helping me along. And so for the last 15 years, I've been running basically a startup business within a business. And what's been nice about that is that I've had the resources of Lee and Low to teach me all the things that I didn't know enough about. So what I'm saying is I've done this process before of starting a business, and so I thought I knew what I was doing. And 2 years into this business, running it myself, I'm realizing all the gaps that I've had, and especially because this is a different part of the book business. And so there are things that I only knew from the outside, or only knew as a bookseller for a semester when I was in graduate school getting a master's in children's literature. So like there are things that I knew about, but I hadn't experienced fully until I had been fully in the business. So taking those classes earlier as a supplement to my learning with my SBA advisor would have helped me to really dive deeper and get a little bit more realistic. And what it boils down to is that you don't know what you don't know. You have to learn it. And sometimes you can learn it from other people. You can learn from their experience. You can talk to other people who have been through it. But even if they've been through it, say hi to Juju. I talked to multiple other bookstore owners as I was starting out. And they told me, you need to know this, 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 and this. And I would take 2 out of 5 to heart because I didn't understand. Like, a friend told me, oh, you need to look into this point of sale system. I didn't know what a point of sale system was. And I didn't realize why it was so important to have a book-specific point of sale system until I was into it with Square, because Square was cheaper, and realizing that I had no way to easily track whether I had double ordered anything. I had no way to easily track whether I had already ordered something, and so I might double order it if it sold out. I did have access to POs, but it didn't connect to the system that publishers use. And so there was no easy way to talk to my rep. And I did pull in Edelweiss and started using Edelweiss because a lot of publishers' catalogs get posted on Edelweiss, which is a website run by a company called Under the Tree Line or something to that effect. Anyway, Edelweiss is a really great way to look through the catalogs when you're doing seasonal ordering, but they're really hard. It was hard. It was hard. So like sometimes I would put my orders through to my reps, no Juju, on Edelweiss, and then I would export it to Square, but they didn't talk to each other well. And so being able to pick up on the backside Basil so that it would automatically track all that I've ordered and send it to the publisher and all of that made my life so much easier. But it took going through the experience and understanding what the drawbacks were of using a point of sale system that is not book specific to understand why I needed that thing. So you don't know what you don't know, but I would definitely start my email list. If you're even thinking about starting a business, start your email list now and do it legally if you're in the US. And the thing that I want to say about all the stuff that I'm talking about is this is very US centric. So if you're in another country, I hope this is useful to you. And I hope that you can basically take what is useful and throw out the rest, because I know that a lot of you who have watched the previous one were in other countries than the US. So hopefully this is useful to you in some way. But anyway, starting an email list, I feel like that's a pretty universal one. Getting out of debt and saving money before you truly dive in, I feel like those are fairly universal no matter what country you're in. Connecting with local community leaders and figuring out, and this is where demographic studies come in. And I did a lot of research on the demographics of the area and compared it to other places that had bookstores that were successful, that were in similar demographic areas. I feel like that is something that you can adapt to wherever you are in the world. For me, it's the Chamber of Commerce or a local economic development committee or the mayor or the local community leaders. In Winsted, there's actually a town manager in addition to a mayor. So there are all sorts of people that you can connect with in your local community to make sure that they are on board and support your new business as well. The main takeaway that may not be as easy for you to be able to take as advice is starting those classes from the Connecticut WBDC. So if you're in Connecticut and you're a woman in particular, you need to pay attention to the WBDC here in Connecticut because they have a wonderful grant program. I've talked about it before. And if you're in the US but in another state, definitely take a look at what your state has to offer as far as the Small Business Administration. And you might have a WBDC. There is one in every state as far as I know, but some of them are more robust than others. I thought they were part of the SBA, but apparently they are an independent nonprofit that is funded by funds from the federal government, and they've had a lot of their funding stripped lately. So take a look at what your local can do, and if you happen to be in a position to help them out to get better funding, connecting them with corporate sponsorship, for example, that's always a good idea. Anyway, those are the 5 things that I would do if I were starting out now, and if I were to be doing this business from the beginning, if I had the chance to go back in time. But the reality of starting any business is that you deal with the hand that is dealt to you. I don't think that's quite the metaphor, but hopefully you understand what I mean. That you do the best you can at the time with the resources that you have and the knowledge that you have. And as you go through the process of running your business, you're going to find out that you've made mistakes. You're going to figure out, oh, I could have been doing this more easily all along. There are things that you're going to learn through the process that you just couldn't learn in other ways because you just didn't have the bandwidth or the resources or the knowledge at the time when you were going through it. So this is not in any way telling you never start a business unless you have $150,000 in savings and have wiped out all your debt and have gone to get a business master's or something like that. This is just saying these are things that I do wish that I had had the ability to do things differently. And if you have the chance to do things a little differently, hopefully this will help you. And with that, that's the end of our podcast. But what I'd love is if you would go below and follow and like this post. And if you like what we're doing, please buy your books from us. We are an independent bookstore in Winsted, Connecticut, and we can ship all over the US. Afraid we're not able to do international shipping at this time. I don't think you'd want that anyway because international shipping is so expensive. But if you're not in the US, please support the local independent bookstores wherever you are. And we'll get through this hard time together as we support each other in our local small businesses as much as possible in our communities, making community, creating third spaces so that we can all gather together in our bookstores or whatever third spaces that we're creating so that we can connect with each other and with each other across the world. So let me know what you think in the comments. What if you've started a business and there are things that you would do differently, let us know in the comments. Or if you've got questions, ask them in the comments. Thank you. Bye.